Most nyilván nem véletlen, hogy itt vannak ezek a székek, úgyhogy egy kerekasztal beszélgetésre kerül sor, amelyről már előzetesen jeleztük, hogy angolul zajlik majd, mégpedig azért, hiszen van egy Nobel-díjas professzorunk, aki nagyon örülünk, hogy elfogadta a meghívásunkat. So let's turn to English. First of all, I would like to introduce and very welcome our very distinguished guest, Nobel laureate Bert Sakmann, Professor Bert Sakmann. And really thank you for accepting our invitation, and let me introduce all our participants. András Varró, Chairman of the Curatorial Board of the Foundation for the Future of Biomedical Sciences in Szeged, and Vice Rector, of course, of the University. Please take a seat here. Gábor Szabó, Rector of the University of Szeged. Venecianer Pál, Research Professor, Member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Szombathelyi Zsolt, Research Director at Gedeon Richter. And our student participants, Kozma Kamila, student at Ferenc Deák Secondary School. Kemény V. Lajos, Mereges student. And Rózsa Márton, biology student. And then let's start our roundtable discussion. I would like to ask you not to hesitate to interrupt each other if you would like to highlight your point of view concerning any topic and any questions. My first question is, what do you think, which question is easier to answer? What is the future of science, or what is the science of future? You've got your microphones, you can take them. And then you can interrupt each other. Okay, you have your microphone. Maybe I give you one of. Adok ide is, jó, és hogyha bárki nyugodtan ragadják ki egymás kezéből. Jó, és adok. Okay, who would like to start to answer this question? Here,
well,
Professor.
This is very easy, you know. The future of science is in the students. Very simple.
Yeah, do you think so, that you are the future of science?
I think we hope so.
Okay. Camilla, as a secondary school student, what do you think?
Of course I do.
Okay. It will be a very interesting discussion. I see.
Let me play the devil's advocate. I think it's an imposed question. First of all, what is the future of science? I would ask, what is the future of humankind without science? I think this is the question, and perhaps this is the first to answer. And if you mean your second question as well, what is the future? What is the science of the future? I believe that there is a clear tendency now that the disciplinary sciences will mix, and there will be a new science which will simply the problem-solving science. And I think sooner or later there will be practically no classical disciplines. You will have problems, and you need competencies to solve those, and you will gather people from every part of the spectrum.
Anybody?
Well, thank you. Probably let me mention, as you know very well, that there are very bad trends these days, or these years, or these decades. Really unscientific and really very strange ideas came up, suggesting that we do something wrong. And this is really our responsibility, that future and science should go together. And this is why we really trust the youngsters, the new generation. Hopefully they will do this better than we have done that in the past.
I think it's all about support. What do you think? Would you have been able to achieve a Nobel Prize in other country or not?
In other countries?
Yeah, in other country. If you.
Well, I was just asked by your TV interviewer, what is it? What are the factors? And the factors is you have to have a good idea. Secondly, you have to have a good environment. And third, you have to have luck. And I think this can be done in any country. This is not dependent on the country where you are. At least, let's say, in the developed countries. So, taking these 3 factors, this is completely independent of countries.
How is actually supported research in Germany?
Well, maybe I shouldn't say this because the politicians like this a lot, but we are very well supported, but there is no reason to cut it.
Okay, what about Hungary? How is this supported here in our country?
At present, we are not very happy with the support of science in this country. So it could be and should be much better, I think. It is very unfortunate that if we hear the speeches of politicians, we very rarely hear about the science and the significance of science and what science could mean for the future. So we would like to have politicians more responsive to the scientists' requirements.
Also, I think I agree, but sometimes I feel not so much regarding the amount of money which is spent in Hungary, the science, but the way how it is spent. So I think how much there is not enough money for science, I think, all over the world, and Hungary is obviously not as rich as Germany or the United States. But my major concern is when we get the money and the money is not very well used. I think we need better grant systems which would allow us to use the money which is available more efficiently. This is, I think, which we have the money, then we have to spend it much more reasonably as it is.
Perhaps it's not quite an accident, but the Chancellor of Germany is a physicist.
Yes. I think this contributes a lot, I have to say. This is very fortunate for science, that she is a physicist, used to think in clear terms. Okay?
It's a good way. Yeah.
But I don't think it is the very important thing. President Obama of the United States is not a scientist, but still he's very supportive of science.
What do you think? How should the government support the science nowadays in Hungary?
I agree that it is not primarily the question of money. It is the attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps one very important element is missing, and this is stability in the support system. We were not speaking about this yet, but one of the major problems, and this goes back to the question whether young scientists in Hungary will see a future or not. She or he will definitely not see a future if the only thing she knows is that it will change in 2 years. And actually, let me just cite one really positive example, and this is the Momentum program of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, under which there are relatively large grants are offered to primarily young scientists that would start a new research group, but it is for 5 years. For 5 years you can plan. The problem is that, which actually it's my personal problem when I'm speaking to my young colleagues, that when they ask me whether there will be money for their job in a year, I can only say yes, because we had money, some or the other sources, but I just cannot tell them actually which source it will be. And this uncertainty is something which is very important, first of all, when we are speaking about our younger colleagues.
What are your other expectations as a young scientist?
Yeah, I'm starting my PhD this year, and as I see as a PhD student, that the most important for a PhD student is to work hard. we are not into these things they are talking about. That's all.
When we are considering our options, where to study forward, I think it's a really important factor where we can find some certainty. So if we look for other labs around in Europe, sometimes we can find labs that they have fundings for, they know that they will have fundings till 2018, and that's really good. So what Professor Sabo just mentioned, I think that's really important to have this kind of knowledge, what we can expect from the labs that we are working on. So that's, I think it's really important.
Camila?
Well, all I can say is that I don't agree with the statement that it is not the question of money. 60% of science is a question of money.
What is the other 40? What do you think?
Oh, it's more complex. Everything else. My only example can be, of course, example from high school. In physics class, there are times when we can't, when the teacher can't show experience just because we don't have the tools. Mm-hmm. So we have the teacher, we have the students, we have interest, we have knowledge, but we don't have the tools.
Mm-hmm. It's a very important point of view, how we should teach natural sciences to make it attractive for young scientists.
Well, I think that the first criteria would be not to screw up, because what we see, I used to say that every children is a born-in physicist, but some of them finally will grow up.
They don't find it in themselves.
But you see, the problem is that there was a reform, I don't want to go into details, which actually shifted the focus towards abstract concept of science. And in early ages, children are taught with concepts that are simply not for their cognitive state. And on the other hand, experiments, real hands-on experiments vanished almost from the curricula. And that's a very bad development. The real and very simple cure would be to increase the first-hand experience, the meeting with real life, because this is practically interesting for everybody, and try to leave out the undigestible abstract concepts out of the curricula, because this carries on another very important danger, that if some of my freshman physics students simply have no idea what is to understand something, or perhaps they don't have an idea what is not to understand something, because they are just learning. They know how to learn, but they don't know how to understand. And that is actually a very bad situation, because if you are already 18, 19, and you don't really have, you never thought, gee, this is stupid, I cannot understand. No, because this is kind of stupid, this is kind of stupid, but I can learn everything. And that is a very dangerous attitude, which is now, I believe, that is not more or less a result of this reform process, and this has to be changed very quickly.
What is the most important? Yeah, please.
I see one other important thing. During the socialist years, pseudoscience was artificially suppressed. After the changes, it came out as a sort of liberation, and pseudoscience has a very wide forum now in public media. And I think it is very dangerous, because it is too attractive for many people.
I would just add one comment. I think one thing is, according to my opinion, is important to somehow increase the prestige of the teaching profession, because everything started at the elementary school, then in the high school with good teachers. If in the old time, that was a very prestigious work in Hungary to be a high school teacher. So that was something which was considered a very high prestige job. I think we should put more money and effort to acknowledge the work of the teachers, because this is the beginning.
Martin had an interesting question before. I would like to repeat it, not during this discussion, but before. It was that what is the most important factor to be a good scientist? A good secondary school, a good university, a good mentorship? What do you think?
Well,
into your microphone,
as
please.
I tried to say, these are preconditions, but in the end, you have to have good ideas, you know. And if you train them into a rigid curriculum, they take everything for granted. And and I would agree with Gabor that the interest in science comes from experimenting. You see something happening. Can't be true, you know, I have to find out what's going on. So in Germany, we have a number of experimental labs. One of them is in Göttingen, called the X Lab, but they are all over the country, where high school students can do experiments. Even, you know, the Göttingen X Lab, obviously, they learn how to pull patch pipettes, you know, but in other labs, they learn how to sequence. And I think the good scientists will come out of these schools, X-Lab. And I completely agree, without experiment, it's useless.
Other opinions, yeah? Not other opinion, but...
Well, it is really very interesting. You know, I have a lot of colleagues, and they are very different. So I have colleagues who are very deep, and they do a very specific work on a narrow field, and go deeper and deeper and deeper, and they are excellent. And I have other colleagues who are a little bit superficial, and they don't understand so deep, but they can touch the other neighboring science fields, and they are also excellent. So my understanding is that science now is a group work, a teamwork. People, in the best case, from very different science fields, should go and work together. And this interdisciplinary team makes a real good science.
How do you see this cooperation?
I just wanted to make a very short comment to the previous question. I think I would say that the student should be curious, because the science is just the why and maybe the how. So somebody who is really curious should go to sciences. If not, I think then should choose another profession.
I believe there is one factor that is very rarely mentioned to be a good scientist. First of all, experimental scientist. You have to have, it's almost equally important, you have to have good ideas and extreme failure tolerance. Because the first thing you will see is failure. That is for granted.
Do you have it?
I was
Sorry, into your microphone, please.
I was asked this many times, how often did you fail? My usual answer is, I failed so many times I can't tell you.
How can actually industry support science and vice versa?
If we make a distinction between applied science and basic science, and I'm not sure is this a good terminology, but anyway it exists. So industry is unable to go to the roots and discover new elements of science. What we need to do, since we are under time pressure, we are under output pressure very much, we have to very much focused, and we have to do our job in a certain period of time in strong competition with other companies. This is where we are really experts, and what we can do really very well. It is absolutely clear that we need input elements, and this must have to come from the academia, from universities, from the basic science workshops, and therefore we really need to collaborate with these units. And if we do that together, from one hand the industrial style, and from the other hand the intuitive science, then this can result in good products.
How do you see it from the side of the scientific community?
Well, I think that these all have their significance in their place. Because on one hand, of course, and I don't like this applied science concept, because it's really, there is one part which I would rather call curiosity-driven science, which basically where the science is driven by the questions, and basically you don't have in mind the usefulness. But of course, this does not mean that the discovery you are actually making is not useful, perhaps in decades. It's a famous story that Willis Lamb, who was the co-inventor of the effect of magnetic resonance, was asked in 1947 or so, 1947, what the actual applicability or practical significance of his idea was, and he answered, not at all whatsoever, but it's a very nice physical experiment. That was his concept, and of course, if you ask somebody who just whose life was saved by a magnetic resonance scanner, it would be a very different picture, but not in the mind of the inventor at the moment of invention.
I would here argue for the importance of the basic science, and that's the best example probably, because when Professor Sackmann first saw the single channels, I don't think that you were thinking about how to make money with this invention, but today this is a very important and basic tool for industry to develop new drugs. So this is a very good example that basic science should be supported first, and with useful and good basic science, the applied science will continue and will make the profit. But if somebody thinks that we should support the applied science first, I think that's the wrong way according to my judgment.
Yes? Yes, sir?
So, but once again, sorry, so you better don't mix up. There are two sources of total misunderstanding. When university professors think that they are expected by the industry to tell them how to solve their problems, there is nothing of the kind. So they should remain in their labs. On the other hand, you really have to know that the light bulb was not the consequence of the industrial development of the candle.
Yes, you're right. How is actually the cooperation between science and industry in Germany?
Well, again, I'm sort of rather optimistic. In the biological sciences, we have quite a number of cooperations with big drug companies. And I myself profited from this a lot for a certain time, although the outcome for the drug company was close to zero. But what it showed is that this particular company was ready to support basic science. And after 5 years, they still hadn't a drug, so they said, it was fine with me. And I have many examples like this. In the physical sciences, the exact sciences, we have what's called the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, and they are at the interface between industry and basic science. And I think it works quite well. I mean, I don't know of a better way to have a balance between basic science and industry. Obviously, it is biased towards goods that we can sell, like BMW cars and stuff like this, But the new gadget, let's say in a BMW, is you have a sensor that senses whether a person is coming across and stops you. And this is based completely on basic science or the application of basic science. And this will be a big seller, I can tell you. It's just one example. So
You mentioned before that the future of science are the students. Why do you like meeting students?
Usually they ask questions you have never thought about, you know, that this is a question. And you have to rethink some of your concepts, or it becomes clear that you have not been very clear in what you are telling. But especially, I'm talking about students that come to the lab, and my first question is, you want to have a bread and butter project or something risky? And without exception, they all want something risky. And then we sit down and develop, try to answer. It's not always a success, but in my case, we had a few successes. So to answer your question, it's a source of intellectual influx into the lab.
Okay, now you have the opportunity to influence intellectual Professor Sackmann. Would you like to have a question? Do you have a question to him, maybe?
Yes. My question is if you would have, if you have students, like PhD students, or if you would apply, if you would have a secondary school student to join your lab and work there, then what would be the main features of the student you would like to choose? So which is a good student?
Sorry, I mean, I must make clear that I have had rather few students. It's mostly postdocs. You are very selfish. They are well trained, usually. I mean, the hard part to train a student, some other lab has done. And you have now a postdoc. And these are the best people to work with because they know how to operate the instrumentation, they know the literature, and this is what I call students. Now, if you ask me what is a major, character, they must be curious and accurate. These are the two things I usually judge them.
How can you imagine your career in 10 years, for example?
That's a nice question. I think we all struggle with that. Personally, I have some problems because I don't really know about what to choose. I'm a medical student, so I can go into medicine, I can do research, and it's a bit hard to do things at the same time, but I think probably that's what I will try to do. So I don't really know yet.
Camilla, what about you?
I would like to get over my final exam first and get into university, and then I'll think about it afterwards.
Okay. Marta?
Yeah. I think in 10 years I will be coming back to Hungary from England or another lab, and I will start my own lab here, I hope.
Great. With an ERC grant, you know? We didn't talk about the ERC grants. This is a great opportunity for countries like Hungary, and I'm surprised that Hungary is doing quite well compared to other East European states, or maybe I shouldn't say this, Southern European states.
New member states.
Yeah. Okay, good. So there is I think there have been at least 3 or 4 ERC grants awarded to Hungary. You just hook up to those who were successful, ask them how to do it, and then apply all the time. Mm-hmm. Then you have no more problems with money.
Actually, what is the international recognition of the Hungarian scientific community? What do you think?
Me?
Yes, you too, but other people too. What do you think?
Well, I only can judge my field, and neuroscience, they are extremely well respected. Mm-hmm. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but there is also the Hungarian mafia, in neuroscience. And they are very well respected. And if there were people to apply from Hungary, if I were younger, I would always take them, Mm-hmm. But they prefer England. The young Hungarians prefer England.
Why is that?
Only in neuroscience, I guess, because otherwise Germany is one of the major destinations of Hungarians. But especially neuroscience, perhaps because of Peter Somogyi.
Because of Peter, yes.
I believe that there is really a flux.
Why do you think Hungarian scientists prefer England? As,
neuroscience.
That was in neuroscience.
Only in neuroscience.
Most importantly, probably for two reasons. Money-wise, I would not only tell England, but the United States, where there are even more abundant resources, and the language. Because people, they can speak English, and most of the young people now in Hungary, I suppose they speak English and can accommodate better in countries where English is the native language. But I think Germany is also popular nowadays. This is the two most areas.
Would you like to highlight your opinion? Because I saw that.
I don't think that there is a general preference for England. So, for instance, looking at EMBO fellowship applications, which I know, Germany is quite favored among the applicants.
Well, I was specifying it for neuroscience, you know,
Yes,
that's the only
that might
field
be
I
true.
really know.
Yes.
And this is definitely Peter, you know. Right, students to England.
Actually, what scientific areas can Europe be competitive in? What do you think?
Neuroscience, for instance.
Okay, but we can turn into another topic, maybe.
Well, if I'm not too selfish, there is a strong industrial background in photonics, which actually means at least some areas of laser physics are the strongest in Europe. And since there is this industry which is called photonics, is a fast-growing industry, I believe that the economic advantage of Europe may even further support that area. So I believe that there could be some future in applied laser science in Europe.
Just a month ago, a new flagship program was launched by the European Union, and this is the Human Brain Project. But on the one hand, this is neuroscience, and on the other hand, this is computer science. And really one purpose of this is a 10-year, 1 billion euro program, is to construct new supercomputers. So I suppose on one hand, really neuroscience, but on the other hand, electronics and computing.
Well, if you are speaking about flagship projects, there was another flagship project which finally was turned down, and its name is Future ICT. This is again an area, scientific area, where Europe is strong, and this is big data and complexity science, which is an emerging science now, where basically you deal with issues like, for instance, moving of human crowds and stuff like that. And in this area, again, there was, you see, the design was that this Future ICT project was conceived in Europe, and a year later, I read in an American journal that it is an American idea. So if they are stealing the ideas, that shows you that perhaps you are doing a good job.
I think it's also outside of neurobiology we are competitive in many ways. I think in cardiology, in immunology, in molecular biology. Of course, we have to look at the size of the country, the resources, but I think the future where we will be competitive depends on the young people, because there is always with cycles. Whoever now is in the top, the next generation can be reversed. So I think everything depends on the new generation, because we have a lot of opportunities in Hungary in different directions in biomedical science.
If we compare the European science with the American one, I think the problem of Europe is not the quality of the scientists, but the structure of the scientific establishment, which is much more rigid than the American one. And probably that is the main reason why the American science is now more competitive.
Do you agree? How can we make science more visible for young people, as you mentioned? It's very important. And, of course, for the public, because it's another interesting point.
Well, I question this, you know. There have been so many attempts now to publicize, and such a lot of sloppy science has been publicized that I completely oppose this. You know, every little finding is blown out of proportion. I don't know how often Alzheimer has been solved. You know, must be about 100 times or so. We still have no drug, and so on, or Parkinson, or whatever. And this, I just spent 3 years in the States, in Florida, and you wouldn't believe what's going on there. I mean, we are going to solve everything in the next half year. And this is, if we go this way, in Europe, we will not have good scientists. We'll just have people who move a lot of air, hot air. Anyway, so I'm very, very opposed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I fully agree with that. But I think the main problem, we have already addressed the 2 major aspects, because I also agree with Pali, who saw as a big danger the pseudoscience. So on one hand, we have the pseudoscience, which is sold in masses, and the other hand, we would expect decent science to be sold, but these are sold in a way which is euphemistically oversold. And that's the other danger, because this definitely will lead to disappointment. So after the 200th cure of Alzheimer, people will say that, okay, fine, these guys don't do anything useful. And so this is 2 very real dangers. On one hand, you come up with pseudoscience, which is very digestible for the public, so it's easier to understand. You don't really have to think about it. Of course, it is bullshit. On the other hand, when you are overselling the real science, that's just as dangerous. And I believe that's a very difficult job to do it right.
Well, maybe I have to take this back. I'm also surprised how quickly the public forgets. That's another thing, you know. You solve Alzheimer's, 2 weeks later nobody talks about it. 4 weeks later a new drug comes along, everybody's excited, and so on and so on. So the public does not keep a record, at least where I have been in Florida. They don't, you know. The more publicity you have, the better it is for your grant situation, no matter whether you find something out or not.
Mm-hmm. That is the great luck for politicians.
Yes,
into your microphones, please, because everybody would like to laugh. Yeah?
I agree with Gabor, but I think there is another problem. Most good scientists are not very good communicators. That is natural. That is not a problem. But the problem is that those few who are good communicators are sometimes detested by the rest of the scientists.
And why is that? What do you think?
Because the communication with the public means in most cases simplification. And many good scientists think that it is unpardonable to simplify things as these good communicators do. But I think we must agree that this must be done this way.
Do you agree it's very important to visualize more better the important discoveries?
I think in general I would say yes, but I'm still reluctant and I don't know how to do that, because I was happy to hear you that it is so dangerous, because our practice is basically not having not too strong communication with the press, because we feel ourselves very much home in the scientific community, in the lab, in scientific journal, and let other people to somehow show the importance of our work, not ourselves, because this is how usually we work. So probably this can be improved. I don't know how really, because we have to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, my experience is that every decent institution has a PR department, you know, and they have friends in the New York Times, and all of a sudden something rather simple appears in the New York Times as a big discovery. Everybody knows this is, you know, it's nothing special, but I have published in the New York Times, you know, this is the big thing in the States right now, to be quoted. And all you can do, you can buy this, you know. I mean, there is a lot of corruption. Anyway, if we go this way, I would never be a scientist, I just tell you.
Camilla, I think you wanted to mention.
Just a short comment on simplification. I find it essential to simplify science when showing to the public, because we're talking about how we should make it more attractive to the public, to ordinary people, aren't we? And it should be generalized to be more logical and global, because otherwise people find it scary and they don't want to learn about it at all.
What is your opinion about the communication skills of scientists?
Well, I think we could hear a lot more about scientists. So I think everybody here knows about Hawking in Cambridge, and he's doing something that we don't really do. I'm not saying it's a problem, but still, I think there's some ways that we could improve it. As mentioned before, I think we can actually remember what's worth remembering, and there are a lot more ways to improve it, I think, in the media. I'm not really sure how to do that. I think there are better people for that, but still, I think it should be improved.
Márton?
I don't think that it is very important for science to be advertised to the public. I think the most important thing is for the university teachers to speak with secondary school, high school students who are very interested in science and work with them, not with everyone, but the very talented ones who are curious and who are willing to work and be a scientist later on.
What do you think, what kind of strategies would be necessary to get a Nobel laureate in Hungary again?
I don't think that we need, according to my opinion, a very special strategy for Nobel laureates. We just need a strategy for good science. And if there will be luck enough, and if we can make science in Hungary popular, and conditions in science attractive, salary-wise, equipment-wise, environment-wise, then it may happen. But I won't do a special strategy toward Nobel.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is really a conceptual problem. It's a bit similar to university rankings. So if you want to make a good university, then there is a strategy. But if your goal is to gain 50 places in an international ranking, then you are totally in the dead end, because it makes no sense. One will bring perhaps with it the other, but never the other way around. So if you are obsessed with getting a Nobel Prize, then you will definitely never get one. If you just try to do a decent job, you want to make decent science and support those who are doing it, then you may have luck, and it can happen. But I would never focus on such a strategy that is obsessed with getting a Nobel Prize.
Actually, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the Hungarian research environment? No strengths?
It's too complicated.
But we have got time for that.
No, actually, I think that the problem really starts with education. So we perhaps really should start with public education and strengthen the scientific part of it. By the way, not only the scientific part. I think that the problem is general, but I think it can be easier measured in sciences. I don't think that the history or Hungarian language, for that matter, is taught much better than physics. It's only more difficult to measure. But in any case, we need a decent public school system. And of course, when we speak about the scientific establishment, then of course the major issue is to give a future perspective to students, to people who have plans to run their own research group in 10 years. And the biggest danger in Hungary, I used to say, is not brain drain, but brain push. Because for some reason, perhaps for cultural reasons, partially for cultural reasons, there is a threshold for Hungarians to leave Hungary. If I compare Hungary with Poland, for instance, it is the emigration rate of Poland is much higher for some reason, and this is what I think it can be partially cultural. Hungarians are more attached to Hungary. But if they don't see, if a young researcher don't see a clear future, a future possibility, then he or she will leave. And that's what I call brain push. It's not because there are 20% or 30% more salary here or there. This is not a serious attraction. If they saw that their perspective here, then they would remain here. And that's perhaps the major issue. Because if you can solve this, then you will have enough young scientists in Hungary, and there will be then decent science in Hungary.
I completely agree. I would just make it very briefly twofold. One is resources in salary and environment-wise, and the deep, well-thought strategy. I think what we, like everything is now in one day to another. The rules are changing, grants are changing, concepts are changing, so we need a deep, well-thought strategy for the long term and provide more money, because we don't spend as much money comparing our GDP versus science as other countries, which we should do, but I think we need the strategy as well.
I see another important problem. That is a phenomenon what Elemér Hankis, the sociologist, formulated very well in the ancient regime, that Hungarians are failure-oriented and they treat with suspicion the success. So therefore, in Hungary, many people who really achieve success are treated that there is something wrong with them. They didn't do anything well, they had good connections, they had protections, and so on. And those who failed, they are the nice guys.
And is it possible to change the mind of our community?
I don't know how should it be changed, but it must be changed.
Are you actually optimistic in that way and in other way? Because Professor Sackman has mentioned that he's optimistic about the future of science concerns and other fields. Are you optimistic too? You can see how optimistic they are.
I think we should be optimistic and we should not underestimate all the results which we achieved. I think if we you ask about the problems, so we try to somehow answer what are the problems, but I think we could show a lot of very good achievements in the last 20 years as well. Just there are a lot of problems in the same time.
Well, fortunately, as far as I can tell, your best students are not going either into finance or into law. And this is what you see in other countries. I won't mention names. And they are in deep trouble, or they're going to be in deep trouble. And somebody said in 10 years they will only sell pizzas to each other. And I don't know what the trend is here, whether all the bright students go into financing. But look at the problem of England, They even can't make a car anymore. So you are at a stage where you have to give the young people, these young people, a bright perspective not to go into financing. Mm-hmm. That's what or law. I mean, you need a certain percentage, but you have to redirect your bright students into something that is decent, I would say.
Perhaps just one comment on optimism. If you are teaching and you are doing science, then you are by definition optimistic, because teaching and science will not bring any success immediately. So if you are expecting success that will happen in the future, that means you have to believe that there is a future. Otherwise, you are really on the wrong place.
Actually, I asked our young participants how they can imagine the future in 10 years, their career. What's your answer? How can you imagine your career, your life in 10 years? What, where, and how are you doing? I hope that you have...
Well, 10 years is just the development time of a new drug. So, and a little bit coming back to the former question, and you know, it is too much for me to speak about the Hungarian science future in general. But what I can speak about one single company's research situation. And in 2000, we made a huge reorganization because we were in a very bad situation. And now we are in the registration process in the US, what was reached only once in the life or in the history of Hungary. So really I think that if there is a good team, enthusiastic, very much devoted, and well, of course, some financial background is also needed, then there is a chance. And well, after this, in 10 years, we should bring the new, the second new pharmaceutical to the market.
I think I agree. One of the students who made the remark, that's a realistic goal. Maybe if I add 5 years more, I can be the most talented, curious, and motivated students can be successful professors enjoying research and showing very nice internationally recognized research, because I think we will and we should have the resources because we are on the way, I think, improving. Mm-hmm. So I'm optimistic.
All right. How can you imagine yourself in 10 years?
If you provoke me, in 10 years, in 10 years, hopefully, in addition to tending my grandchildren, I will again run my own research group.
Okay. Professor Sackman, how can you imagine?
Well, at my age, you have to look for a new, let's say a new field of interest. And since I have 3 grandchildren, I'll try to educate them or get them interested in what you would call science, or something not connected to finance or law. Well, law, but anyway, this is what I'll try to attempt by teaching them, playing, and make experiments with them. Whether I will succeed is an interesting experiment, because it's in our brains, and if your brain is not ready, or is ready for other things, you can teach them as much as you want, but I see this as an experiment. Okay?
Okay, thanks a lot. I would like to say thanks to all of you for accepting our invitation and sharing your point of view, and thank you very much for your attention. Nagyon szépen köszönjük a figyelmet, és nagyon szépen köszönöm mindenkinek a részvételt.
A projekt az Európai Unió támogatásával, az Európai Szociális Alap társfinanszírozásával valósul meg.